Your Excellency, Senator Mohammed Ishaq Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan. At the outset, my delegation thanks you for convening today's open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. I also thank Assistant Secretary General Khalid Kiari for the important updates provided, particularly regarding the persistent and inhumane crisis being experienced by civilians in Gaza. Mr. President, Guyana remains deeply concerned at the ongoing volatile security situation in the Middle East, fueled primarily by the violation of international law and the resort to forceful measures in response to perceived or real security threats. Should this trend continue, the insecurity and instability in the Middle East could destabilize the entire international system. Guyana continues to follow developments in the occupied Palestinian territories, where this trend is most pronounced. In Gaza, the result after 21 months of war is a humanitarian crisis of immense scale. Briefings by the United Nations over this period have highlighted massive and multiple instances of displacement of civilians, widespread food insecurity, with the risk of famine extremely high, and reports of even babies starving to death, and the inadequacy of the humanitarian response due to ongoing restrictions imposed by Israel. It is particularly striking, Mr. President, that an average of 28 children are killed daily in Gaza, as reported by UNICEF. Nothing can justify this crisis that has been deliberately created and foisted on Palestinian civilians. After witnessing the devastation in Gaza for almost 2 years, Guyana reiterates its call on Israel to comply with its obligations under international law, including those governing occupation and the conduct of war. Mr. President, Excellencies, evidence has shown that misinformation has been used as a weapon in this war. We have seen this in the allegations against UNRWA of being involved in terrorist activities, resulting in funding cuts to the agency last year, and ultimately to the Israeli government taking legislative action against it. This happened despite the lack of incontrovertible evidence to support the allegations. We are witnessing the same strategy at work regarding the operations of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. Despite the evidence that the GHF is not operating in accordance with humanitarian principles and the deliberate and daily killing and injury of civilians at GHF sites, we are told that the GHF is the best option to deliver aid to Palestinian civilians in need. The reports from the United Nations, however, tell a completely different story, which is also corroborated by reports from international NGOs and media sources privy to the situation in Gaza. It is important to counter all false narratives about what is happening in Gaza as a critical step towards addressing the impunity that has characterized actions there and for promoting accountability. We continue to rely on the UN and its partners in Gaza to this end. Mr. President, we continue to deplore the indiscriminate manner of Israel's strikes in Gaza, where it appears that virtually nothing is off limits. Targets have included people sheltering in schools and tents, people seeking food, water, nutrition supplies, or other assistance, medical and humanitarian relief personnel, and journalists. Following last week's strike on the Holy Family Church in Gaza, we took note of the explanation provided by the Israeli Defense Force, including its assertion that it directs its strikes solely at military targets. Guyana stresses that there should be no trivializing of the very serious consequences of Israel's war in Gaza, which has resulted in thousands of casualties. These consequences cannot be explained away. the road to accountability begins with fully acknowledging all violations of international law, including international humanitarian law. Mr. President, Excellencies, it is urgent that the parties reach agreement on a ceasefire in Gaza. The civilian cost continues to be alarming. It is also urgent that all hostages being held captive in Gaza be released without conditions. In the same vein, Palestinians detained in Israel without charge must also be released. The safety of humanitarian personnel must be guaranteed if they are to take full advantage of the limited lifting of restrictions on humanitarian access into Gaza. Moreover, we call on Israel to cooperate with the United Nations and its humanitarian partners to ensure that they can deliver life-saving assistance to civilians. Taking note of reports of plans to create a containment zone in Rafah, Guyana calls on Israel not to pursue any such plan that would further restrict the movement of civilians in Gaza and confine them to an even smaller space. We call for an end to the ongoing displacement of Palestinians in Gaza. We also call for an end to the ongoing violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, including violence perpetrated by settlers. Excellency, allow me to conclude by urging the Security Council to safeguard the rights of Palestinians. At the heart of this is enabling the exercise of their right to self-determination through the implementation of the two-state solution. Guyana remains fully supportive of this objective and hopes that the high-level conference on the two-state solution next week will advance this process. I thank you.